what they're talking about how people feel um about their lives. And I feel like this is quite an informal delivery. Parents are getting older. They've been in control their whole lives and been successful. It's like saying they have been making their own decisions, um, and um, and in control of things like their finances, their housing, their holidays for their whole adult lives. If you were going to pull it apart, I think that this is a kind of condensed way of talking about that idea. So they're used to basically deciding for themselves as adults how they should spend their time, what they should do with their lives. Um, and they've been successful. So this is a separate point. That is, things have worked out for them through that period. So if they're older, they're more likely to have a successful career, um, you know, to own their own home, all of those things. So the when I used to live in an apartment that was upstairs um, from a family, and the it was a grandmother, a mother, and a 2-year-old child. And the mother had had the 2-year-old when she was about 18 or 19 years old, and she was still living at home with her mother, and she didn't have a job. So she wasn't really in control in the way that they mean here. She was young, and because of that, she hadn't had any career success. In fact, she'd never even really had a career. She had a job, but she hadn't really studied anything except for high school. And I think that's the contrast. So if people have children when they're young, they haven't experienced all of the kinds of adult experiences that older people get access to. I think that's the point. Yeah, that's right. Um, yeah, so when they're talking about parents getting older, they're talking about parents as a category. So, 30 years ago, most people had had kids by the time they were 30, in Australia. But but now, many people haven't had a child until they're 35 or even 40 years old. So that's the pattern that they're talking about, and they're saying that that pattern, demographic pattern, also means that the experiences that people have had before they have children are different. So they're generalizing, and like they'd be generalizing from like socioeconomic data. People in their early 20s or in their late teens are less likely to have jobs. They're less likely to have qualifications. They're less likely to own their own homes. They're less likely to have careers. People in their early 30s or even their late 30s are much more likely to have all of those things. So they're generalizing. They're talking, and also they're talking, I personally think that they're talking about rich people. And they're like, yeah, because I don't think that anyone who isn't already rich would be looking for a parenting consultant. Like, because you wouldn't have money to do that. And I guess there are different ways of being rich. Like you can be rich because you've got a good job and you've been doing it for a while, or you can be rich because you inherited it. And I think they're talking more about being rich because you've ended up with a good job, possibly because you inherited something, but yeah. The role of the parenting consultant has developed. So, yeah, and we've got between the dashes, we've got like a parenthetical distinct from that of a nanny. So it's like putting it in brackets. So this role, distinct from a nanny's role, has developed as people are used to buying in expertise. So the reason why it's developed is because people are are they've become familiar with paying for experts to help them, such as personal trainers, um, and in this case, parenting advice. So people are used to, oh, I don't know how to work out. I'm going to pay someone to show me. So she's saying now people are used to doing that instead of just doing whatever they feel. They're now paying someone to tell them how to be a parent. Okay, so in this case, they help with behavior. So I think what happens is someone's kid is being naughty all the time. They don't know how to stop them. So they get a parenting consultant to come along. That person kind of watches them interact for a while and then gives them some advice. Then they practice it and then they come back later and check, see how things are going. I think that's what we but it could also be like, oh, my for some reason every time I try and give my child a meal, they start screaming and crying. Can you tell me why? Um, and the parenting consultant watches you and says, probably you should stop force feeding them. Yeah. So bohemian is I guess a word that has a sort of clearer definition. Um, Bohemian usually means someone who has is interested in art, um, but also doesn't act in a conventional way. So, it might be an artist, but it might also just be somebody who likes spending time. Um, Not necessarily. It could just be a lifestyle. They could be really into drugs as well. That not necessarily. It's very hard to pay to survive while being a bohemian or a hippie if you don't have some money from somewhere. So I think a lot of them have at least some money that they've inherited.